Mother Bear approached a dying shepherd of this human boy. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The early morning mist hung low over the valley as 12-year-old Noah Parker set out with his aging dog, Rusty. The old shepherd mix had been by Noah's side since he was a toddler. But lately, Rusty moved with painful slowness, his once alert eyes clouded with age. The villagers had taken to calling Rusty the Dying Shepherd, a nickname that made Noah's chest tighten with sadness each time he heard it. "Come on, boy," Noah whispered, his voice gentle as he guided his small flock of sheep toward the meadow that stretched between their village and the dense forest beyond. The spring air carried the sweet scent of wildflowers, and the mountains loomed in the distance, still capped with winter snow despite the warming days. Noah's father had warned him not to venture too far from the village. "The forest belongs to wild things," he'd said with a stern look, "and wild things don't take kindly to visitors." But the meadow grass was lush after the recent rains, perfect for the hungry sheep, and Noah couldn't resist going just a little farther than usual. Rusty limped alongside him, occasionally stopping to catch his breath. The dog's loyalty never wavered despite his failing body. Each time Rusty paused, Noah would wait, his hand resting on the dog's graying head. "You're still the best shepherd dog in the valley," he'd say, and Rusty's tail would wag weakly in response. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Noah felt a strange dizziness wash over him. He had been feeling unwell for days, but had hidden it from his parents. The farm needed his help, and he couldn't bear to be confined to bed. He sat down heavily on a boulder, his vision swimming. Rusty whined and pressed against his leg, sensing something was wrong. "I just need to rest a moment," Noah told the concerned dog, but the dizziness only worsened. His water flask was nearly empty, and the village seemed impossibly far away now. The sheep grazed peacefully, unaware of their young shepherd's distress. Noah didn't remember closing his eyes, but suddenly he was lying on the ground, the rough grass against his cheek. Rusty's anxious barking sounded distant, as though coming from the end of a long tunnel. Through half-closed eyes, Noah saw his faithful companion standing protectively over him, the dog's arthritic legs trembling with the effort. And then, at the edge of his fading vision, Noah spotted movement at the forest line. Something large was emerging from the trees, moving with deliberate steps toward them. Rusty's barking grew more frantic, more desperate. The old dog placed himself between Noah and the approaching threat, his worn teeth bared in a final stand of protection. The last thing Noah saw before darkness claimed him was the massive shape of a mother bear approaching, her dark eyes fixed on the boy and his dying shepherd, while storm clouds gathered ominously overhead. Would this be their end, or was fate about to take an unexpected turn that would leave the village talking for generations to come? Thunder rumbled in the distance as the mother bear drew closer, her massive paws leaving deep imprints in the soft meadow soil. Rusty's barks had diminished to a hoarse growl, the old dog's strength waning but his devotion unwavering. The sheep scattered in panic, bleating as they fled to the far edges of the meadow, leaving the unconscious boy and his protector alone to face the approaching beast. The bear paused, her nostrils flaring as she caught their scent. She was an enormous creature, her brown fur matted in places, her eyes intelligent and cautious. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, she stood perfectly still, assessing the strange scene before her, a fallen human child and an elderly dog that could barely stand yet refused to abandon its post. Rusty's body trembled violently, not just from fear, but from the tremendous effort it took to remain standing. His arthritic legs threatened to buckle with each passing second. Yet, somehow, driven by 13 years of loyalty and love, the old shepherd dog held his ground, a final act of courage for the boy who had cared for him all these years. A flash of lightning illuminated the meadow, casting harsh shadows across the bear's powerful form. She was close enough now that Rusty could smell her wild, musky scent. The dog's growl deepened, a last warning from a guardian with nothing left to give but his final breath. The bear rose onto her hind legs, towering over them like a furry mountain. Rusty's heart hammered against his rib cage, each beat possibly his last. And then, something unexpected happened. Instead of striking with her massive paws, the bear lowered herself back to all fours and made a soft, almost plaintive sound. Not a growl of aggression, but a call of distress. From the forest edge came an answering whimper. A small bear cub, no more than a few months old, limped into view. Its right front paw was raised, clearly injured, and its movements were slow and pained. The mother bear looked back at her cub, then at the boy and dog, as if caught in an impossible dilemma. Rusty's ears twitched, his protective instinct momentarily confused by this development. The old dog's growl subsided slightly as he watched the injured cub struggle across the meadow toward its mother. There was something in the cub's pained movements that resonated with Rusty's own daily struggle against his failing body. A soft moan escaped Noah's lips as consciousness briefly returned to him. His eyes fluttered open just enough to take in the surreal scene. The massive bear standing mere feet away, her attention divided between her approaching cub and the boy and dog before her. Noah tried to speak, to call for help, but no sound came out. His fever had worsened, and the world spun sickeningly around him. The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and cold, pattering against the meadow grass. The mother bear made that strange calling sound again, more urgent this time. The cub had stopped halfway between the forest and its mother, whimpering as it struggled to put weight on its injured paw. In a moment of either madness or divine inspiration, Rusty did something that defied all natural instinct. The old dog turned away from the mother bear and hobbled painfully toward the stranded cub, each step a testament to his failing strength. The mother bear growled a warning, but did not charge. Perhaps she recognized something in the old dog's movements, not a threat, but a shared understanding of vulnerability. Noah watched through the haze of fever as his faithful companion approached the frightened cub. "Rusty," he whispered, fear for his dog momentarily overriding his own distress. "Come back." But Rusty continued his halting journey until he reached the bear cub. The young animal cowered, clearly terrified of this strange creature approaching it. With gentle movements that belied his arthritic pain, Rusty sniffed at the cub's injured paw, then looked back at the mother bear, as if communicating something only they could understand. The rain fell harder now, soaking Noah's clothes and plastering Rusty's gray fur to his thin frame. The mother bear watched, seemingly torn between protecting her cub from this canine intruder and recognizing that no attack was forthcoming. She huffed, her breath visible in the rapidly cooling air, and took several cautious steps forward. And then, the world went dark for Noah once more, the fever claiming his consciousness again. As his eyes closed, the last thing he saw was his beloved Rusty standing beside the bear cub, two injured souls in the midst of a gathering storm, with the mother bear approaching them both. Time passed in strange fragments for Noah. Flashes of consciousness came and went like the lightning that periodically illuminated the darkening meadow. In one such moment of clarity, he became aware of something large and warm pressed against his side. His fingers touched coarse fur, too thick to be Rusty's. A bear. The mother bear was lying beside him, her massive body creating a windbreak against the driving rain, and her natural warmth seeping into his chilled bones. On his other side lay Rusty, the old dog's body trembling with exhaustion but his eyes alert, watching over his human. And nestled between them, to Noah's astonishment, was the bear cub, its injured paw now crudely bound with a strip torn from Noah's own shirt. The boy had no memory of tending to the cub's wound, but the evidence was there before his eyes. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. Rusty whined softly and licked Noah's hand, as if trying to explain the inexplicable. The mother bear turned her massive head toward the boy, her dark eyes studying him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. She made no threatening moves, simply watched as Noah struggled to make sense of their bizarre situation. The bear cub stirred, making a pitiful sound as it accidentally put weight on its injured paw. Without thinking, Noah reached out to gently stroke its head, his fever-weakened hand moving on instinct rather than reason. The cub flinched initially, then relaxed under his touch, accepting the comfort offered by this strange, two-legged creature. "We're going to die out here," Noah murmured, as much to himself as to his unusual companions. The storm showed no signs of abating, and his condition was worsening. He could feel the heat of fever burning through him despite the cold rain. Rusty was clearly at the end of his strength, and the injured cub needed proper care. As if understanding his words, the mother bear rose suddenly to her feet. Noah instinctively cringed away, but instead of harming him, she gently nudged her cub with her nose. The young bear reluctantly moved away from the warmth of Noah's side. Then, to Noah's utter disbelief, the mother bear lowered her massive body and gently took the back of his shirt between her teeth. With surprising gentleness for such a powerful creature, she began to drag Noah across the meadow, careful not to injure him further. Rusty barked once in alarm, then followed as quickly as his arthritic legs would allow. The bear cub limped along beside the old dog, the unlikely pair following the mother bear as she pulled Noah toward the forest edge. Where are you taking me?" Noah asked, though he knew no answer would come. His mind struggled against the fever, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was this massive predator saving him, or simply dragging him to a more private place to become her meal? And yet, something in the careful way she moved, the gentleness of her grip, suggested purpose rather than hunger. At the forest's edge stood an enormous hollow oak tree. Its massive trunk split open on one side to create a natural shelter. The mother bear pulled Noah inside this makeshift den, where the ground was dry and the air notably warmer than the storm-lashed meadow. She released his shirt and stepped back, allowing Rusty and the cub to enter behind them. Inside the hollow tree, Noah discovered the source of the warmth. A bed of dry leaves and grass had been packed into the base of the trunk, creating a surprisingly comfortable nest. As his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light, he noticed other unexpected items. Berries piled in one corner, and what appeared to be medicinal herbs similar to those his mother used when treating fevers and wounds. "You've been preparing for this," Noah whispered in amazement, his fever-addled mind struggling to comprehend. The mother bear made a soft huffing sound that almost seemed like confirmation. Rusty collapsed onto the nest of leaves, his old body finally giving out after the tremendous effort of the day. The bear cub limped over to him and, in a gesture that defied all natural order, curled up against the dog's side, seeking comfort from a species that should have been its enemy. The mother bear watched this strange alliance with what almost looked like approval in her intelligent eyes. As night fell and the storm raged outside their shelter, Noah drifted in and out of consciousness. In his more lucid moments, he observed the mother bear crushing herbs between her teeth, and mixing them with berries. She nudged this strange concoction toward him, her intent unmistakable. Delirious and with a few options, Noah consumed the bitter mixture. By morning, his fever had broken. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world sparkling in the early sunlight. Noah sat up in the leaf nest, his head clear for the first time in days. Beside him, Rusty slept peacefully, his chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of deep, healing sleep. The bear cub was nowhere to be seen, nor was the mother bear. Noah carefully checked Rusty's condition. The old dog seemed stronger somehow, as if he too had benefited from the mother bear's mysterious medicines. "Rusty," Noah whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. "Wake up, boy. It's time to go home." As Rusty stirred and opened his eyes, a shadow fell across the entrance to their tree sanctuary. The mother bear had returned, and behind her limped her cub, its injured paw still wrapped in the makeshift bandage, but its movement stronger than the day before. Noah held his breath as the massive bear entered their shelter. In her mouth, she carried something that made Noah's eyes widen in disbelief. A small cloth pouch that he instantly recognized as belonging to old Marta, the village healer. The implications were staggering. Had the bear somehow visited the village? Had she stolen the pouch, or had someone given it to her? And how did she know to bring it here? Before Noah could process these questions, the bear dropped the pouch at his feet and backed away, almost respectfully. With trembling hands, Noah opened it to find dried herbs, clean bandages, and a small clay jar of healing salve. Exactly what he and the injured cub needed. "I don't understand," Noah whispered, looking up at the mother bear. "How did you get this?" The bear made no response, of course, but her intelligent eyes held Noah's gaze for a long moment before she turned her attention to the cub. She gently nudged her young one forward toward Noah, in what could only be interpreted as a request for help. Despite his lingering weakness, Noah understood what was being asked of him. He opened the jar of salve and carefully removed the makeshift bandage from the cub's paw. The wound beneath was ugly, a deep puncture that had become infected. Probably a thorn or sharp branch had pierced the pad of the cub's foot, Noah thought. "This might hurt," he told the cub softly, as he cleaned the wound with a damp cloth. The young bear whimpered, but remained surprisingly still, as if it understood the necessity of the pain. The mother bear watched intently, making soft, encouraging sounds to her offspring. Rusty had managed to sit up, his arthritic joints seemingly less painful this morning. The old dog observed the proceedings with calm interest, occasionally licking the cub's face when the pain caused it to cry out. This strange bond between natural enemies continued to defy explanation. After applying the healing salve and wrapping the paw in a proper bandage, Noah finally addressed the mystery of the medicine pouch. "Did old Marta give you this?" he asked the mother bear, feeling slightly foolish for expecting an answer but unable to stop himself. The bear made a soft huffing sound and moved toward the entrance of the tree shelter. She looked back at Noah, then outside, then back at Noah again, a clear invitation to follow. Curiosity overcoming caution, Noah struggled to his feet. Rusty immediately stood beside him, ready to support his human despite his own frailty. "Let's see what she wants to show us," Noah said to Rusty, as they followed the mother bear outside. The cub limped along behind them, staying close to Rusty's side. The morning sun had risen higher now, warming the forest and burning away the last of the storm's moisture. The mother bear led them along a narrow trail that Noah had never noticed before, winding deeper into the forest. He knew he should be frightened, or at least concerned about following a wild bear away from familiar territory, but something about the bear's purposeful movements reassured him. After walking for nearly half an hour, they came to a small clearing dominated by a tiny, moss-covered cottage. Smoke curled from its stone chimney, and wildflowers grew in organized beds around its perimeter. Noah stopped in his tracks, recognition dawning on his face. "Old Marta's forest home," he whispered. Everyone in the village knew that the elderly healer maintained 2 dwellings, one in the village for treating patients and teaching apprentices, and another secret place in the forest where she conducted her more mysterious work and communed with the natural world. As if summoned by his words, the cottage door opened, and old Marta herself emerged. Her white hair hung in a long braid over her shoulder, and her face, though deeply lined with age, carried an expression of serenity that matched the peaceful setting. "I see you've met my friend," she said, nodding toward the mother bear. "And just in time, it seems." Noah's jaw dropped in astonishment. You know this bear?" Old Marta smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "Brenna has been my companion for many years. She was but a cub herself when I first healed her of a hunter's wound." She approached the mother bear without fear, stroking the massive creature's head with affection. "We have an understanding, she and I." The bear, Brenna, leaned into old Marta's touch like a house cat seeking affection. The cub watched this interaction with curious eyes, then approached as well, seeking its own share of attention. "But how did she know to bring me to your shelter? How did she know to get your medicine pouch?" Noah asked, still struggling to comprehend what had transpired. Old Marta's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "Brenna is smarter than most humans give bears credit for. She recognized your illness, the same fever that has been affecting many in the village, and she saw something special in your dog's devotion." The old healer knelt to examine Rusty, her hands gently probing his arthritic joints. "This one has the heart of a wolf in the body of an ancient warrior." Rusty wagged his tail at the praise, seeming to understand every word. The bear cub playfully batted at the dog's wagging tail, no longer afraid of its canine companion. "But there's more to this story," old Marta continued, her expression growing serious. "Brenna didn't find you by accident, Noah Parker. She was searching for help. For her cub's paw." Noah nodded, understanding at least this part. "Yes, but not only that." Old Marta gestured toward the forest behind her cottage. "Come. There is something you need to see." Noah followed old Marta through a garden of strange plants he didn't recognize, their vibrant colors and unusual shapes suggesting properties beyond ordinary herbs. Rusty limped along beside him, showing no signs of fear despite the unfamiliar surroundings. The mother bear, Brenna, and her cub brought up the rear of this most unusual procession. Beyond the garden lay another small clearing, and what Noah saw there made him stop in his tracks. A crude pen had been constructed from branches and vines, and inside it, huddled together in obvious fear, were his missing sheep, all 12 of them, unharmed but clearly distressed. "My flock!" Noah exclaimed, rushing forward. The sheep recognized him immediately, their frightened bleating turning to sounds of relief as they pressed against the makeshift fence, seeking the familiar comfort of their shepherd. Old Marta nodded approvingly. "Brenna gathered them after you collapsed. She has been protecting them here." Noah turned to stare at the mother bear in disbelief. "She saved my sheep? But why would a bear protect sheep instead of—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the implication too disturbing. "Instead of eating them?" Old Marta finished for him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Brenna is no ordinary bear, just as your Rusty is no ordinary dog. There are bonds in this world that run deeper than nature's usual divisions between predator and prey. As if to demonstrate this point, Rusty approached the pen and sniffed at the sheep through the branches. The old dog then turned to look at Brenna, and to Noah's continuing amazement, the two animals exchanged what could only be described as a look of mutual respect. "I don't understand any of this," Noah admitted, his head spinning with the implications of what he was witnessing. Old Marta placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. "Understanding is not always necessary for acceptance, young Noah, but perhaps this will help." She reached into a pocket of her worn apron and withdrew a small, leather-bound journal. "This belonged to your grandfather." Noah took the journal with trembling hands. "My grandfather? But he died before I was born." "Indeed he did," the old healer confirmed. "Jeremiah Parker was a man who understood the secret language of the forest and its creatures. He saved Brenna's mother many years ago, just as you have helped Brenna's cub now." She pointed to the journal. "The connection between your family and these bears spans 3 generations." Noah opened the journal with reverent care. Inside, written in a flowing script he didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar with, were detailed observations of the forest and its inhabitants. Drawings of plants, animals, and what appeared to be maps filled the yellowed pages. And there, on a page marked with a pressed bear's paw print, was a sketch of a bear that looked remarkably like Brenna, but older, larger. "Your grandfather called her Ursa," old Marta explained, looking over Noah's shoulder at the drawing. "She was Brenna's mother. When poachers wounded her with a poisoned arrow, Jeremiah nursed her back to health, right here in this clearing. He wrote that final chapter of his journal just days before the fever took him from this world." Noah turned the pages until he found the last entry. The handwriting was shakier here, evidence of his grandfather's failing health. "I know my time grows short. The fever that has swept through the village has found me too, and at my age I cannot fight it as the younger ones might. My greatest regret is that I will never meet my son's child, who Eliza tells me will arrive with the spring thaw. I leave this journal in Marta's keeping, with the hope that someday my grandchild might find the same connection to this forest and its guardians that I have cherished." Tears blurred Noah's vision as he read the words of the grandfather he had never known. "He was writing about me," he whispered. "Yes," old Marta confirmed. "And now the circle has completed itself. Brenna recognized something in you, Noah, the same spirit that lived in your grandfather. That's why she brought you here when you fell ill with the same fever that took Jeremiah. She was repaying an old debt." Noah looked up at the massive bear with new understanding. Brenna met his gaze steadily, her dark eyes holding a wisdom that transcended her wild nature. The cub playfully batted at Rusty's tail, oblivious to the profound connection being acknowledged between its mother and the human boy. "But how will I explain any of this to my parents?" Noah asked, suddenly aware of how worried they must be. "They'll never believe that a bear saved me and my sheep, or that my dog made friends with bear cubs, or any of it." Old Marta chuckled, the sound like dry leaves rustling in an autumn breeze. "The truth often sounds more fantastical than any lie we could invent, but you need not explain everything." She took the journal from Noah's hands and carefully returned it to her apron pocket. "This will stay here with me for now. When you're older, when you're ready for the full responsibility of your grandfather's legacy, it will be waiting for you." She turned toward the pen of sheep. With a series of whistles and hand gestures that Noah didn't recognize but Rusty seemed to understand perfectly, the old healer instructed the dog to gather the flock. Despite his age and arthritis, Rusty performed the task with renewed vigor, circling the sheep as old Marta opened the makeshift gate. "As for your current predicament," she continued, "you will tell your parents that you fell ill in the meadow and sought shelter from the storm in my forest cottage. I found you there this morning, already recovering, with your faithful dog and all your sheep safely gathered. It is truth enough for now." Noah nodded slowly, accepting the wisdom in her words. Some stories were too extraordinary to be shared before their time. But one question still burned in his mind. "Will I see Brenna and her cub again?" The old healer's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "The forest keeps its own counsel, young Noah. But bonds like these are not easily broken. I suspect your paths will cross again when the need arises, on either side." As predicted, Noah's parents embraced their son with tearful relief when he returned to the village that afternoon, his sheep intact and his health restored. They accepted old Marta's explanation without question, too grateful for their son's safe return to probe deeper into the strange circumstances. The village celebrated the boy's recovery and the miraculous preservation of his flock, attributing it to old Marta's legendary healing abilities and perhaps a touch of divine intervention. Only Rusty seemed changed by the experience in ways that couldn't be hidden. The old dog, who had been on the verge of death just days before, moved with renewed strength. His eyes were brighter, his steps more sure. The villagers whispered about old Marta's mysterious medicines and their miraculous effects, adding another layer to the healer's enigmatic reputation. For his part, Noah kept his promise to old Marta, sharing only the agreed-upon version of events. But at night, when the household was quiet and only Rusty was there to hear, he would whisper the true story of the mother bear who defied nature to save a human boy, of the ancient bond between his family and the forest guardians, and of the legacy waiting for him when he was ready to claim it. Months passed. Summer gave way to autumn, and the memory of Noah's adventure began to fade like the changing leaves. His parents no longer watched him with worried eyes when he took the sheep to graze, and the villagers stopped pointing him out as the boy who survived the storm. Life returned to its normal rhythms, but Noah had not forgotten. Every day, he would take the flock a little closer to the forest edge, hoping for a glimpse of Brenna and her cub. Rusty would sometimes stop and stare into the dense trees, his nose working the air, but the bears remained elusive, present only in Noah's dreams and stories. Then came the first snow of winter, earlier than anyone had expected and heavier than anyone could remember. The village was caught unprepared, with harvests not fully complete and winter stores not adequately filled. As the snow continued to fall, day after day, fear began to take hold. If the harsh weather continued, food would become scarce before spring thawed the fields. One particularly bitter night, as wind howled around their small cottage and snow piled against the doors, Noah awoke to the sound of Rusty scratching frantically at the door. The old dog's behavior was so unusual and so urgent that Noah slipped from his bed and crossed the cold floor to investigate. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, not wanting to wake his parents. Rusty whined and continued scratching, clearly desperate to get outside despite the dangerous storm. Trusting his faithful companion's instincts, Noah pulled on his heaviest coat and boots, wrapped a scarf around his face, and carefully opened the door just enough to allow himself and Rusty to squeeze through. The blast of cold nearly took his breath away, and the snow was so deep it reached above his knees. Rusty didn't hesitate. The moment they were outside, he plunged into the snowdrifts, heading purposefully toward the edge of the village. Noah followed, struggling through the deep snow and questioning his own judgment with every frozen step. What could possibly be important enough to venture out on such a treacherous night? At the village boundary, where the last cottage gave way to open fields now buried under pristine white, Rusty stopped and barked once. The sound was swallowed immediately by the howling wind, but it had served its purpose. From the swirling whiteness emerged a massive, familiar shape. Brenna, the mother bear, her brown fur now dusted with snow. Noah's heart leaped with joy at the sight of her, but that joy quickly turned to concern. Bears should be in hibernation during winter storms like this. Something was very wrong for Brenna to be out in such weather. The mother bear approached slowly, her movements labored. As she drew closer, Noah gasped in horror. A crude metal trap was clamped around one of her hind legs, the chain broken, but the vicious device still biting into her flesh. Blood stained the snow beneath her paw, each step clearly agonizing. "Oh, Brenna," Noah whispered, his voice catching. "Who did this to you?" The bear made a low, mournful sound, but it wasn't her injury that had driven her to seek Noah's help. She turned her massive head, looking back the way she had come, and called out again. A mother's desperate summons. From the swirling snow came not one, but 2 cubs, larger now than when Noah had last seen them. One was Brenna's healed cub, recognizable by the slight limp it still carried. The other was smaller, thinner, and unfamiliar. As they drew closer, Noah realized with shock that the smaller cub was not a bear at all, but a human child. A little girl no more than 4 or 5 years old, dressed in tattered clothes now crusted with ice and snow. The child's face was blue with cold, her eyes vacant with confusion and hypothermia. She stumbled forward on numbed feet, guided and supported by the bear cub as if they were lifelong companions. When she saw Noah, no recognition flickered in her dull eyes. Just the instinctive wariness of a wild creature confronted with the unfamiliar. "Who are you?" Noah asked softly, kneeling to appear less threatening despite the bitter cold seeping through his clothes. "Where did you come from?" The little girl didn't respond. She pressed herself against the bear cub's side, seeking warmth and reassurance. The cub nuzzled her gently, displaying the same unlikely bond that had formed between Rusty and itself months earlier. Brenna made an urgent sound, looking toward the village and then back at Noah. The message was clear. "Help this child, as I once helped you." "I understand," Noah told the mother bear. "I'll take care of her." He slowly approached the little girl, removing his scarf to wrap around her frozen shoulders. "It's all right," he said gently. "I'm going to help you get warm." At first, the child shrank away from his touch, but the bear cub nudged her forward, as if encouraging her to trust this human. Gradually, she allowed Noah to lift her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a tiny bundle of bones and frozen fabric. "Thank you for bringing her to me," Noah said to Brenna. "But you're hurt, let me help you too." The mother bear shook her massive head, backing away one painful step at a time. Her eyes held a sad wisdom that Noah recognized. She knew her time was limited. The trap had done its damage, and the bitter cold had sapped what remained of her strength. She had used the last of her energy to bring this lost child to safety. "Please," Noah begged, tears freezing on his cheeks, "let me get old Marta. She can heal you, like my grandfather healed your mother." Brenna made a soft huffing sound that might have been agreement or farewell. She nuzzled her cub one last time, a mother's goodbye, then turned and limped back into the swirling snow. Within moments, she had vanished, leaving only a trail of blood-stained paw prints that were rapidly filling with fresh snow. The bear cub whimpered, trying to follow its mother, but Rusty gently blocked its path with his body. The old dog seemed to understand that the cub's survival now depended on staying with the humans. After a moment of resistance, the cub surrendered to this wisdom, lowering its head in sorrowful acceptance. "Come," Noah said to both animals and the silent child in his arms. "We need to get out of this cold." The journey back to his family's cottage seemed to take hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few hundred yards. The storm had intensified, and Noah's strength was failing under the combined burden of cold, wind, and the child's weight. Rusty and the bear cub forged ahead, creating a path through the deepest drifts that Noah could follow. When they finally reached the cottage door, Noah's mother was already awake, frantic with worry over her son's disappearance. Her cry of relief quickly turned to astonishment at the sight before her, her son, half frozen but determined, a strange, silent child in his arms, their old dog Rusty, and most shockingly a bear cub that showed no fear of humans. "Noah, what in heaven's name?" she began, but Noah cut her off. "She's freezing, Mother. Please help her," he pleaded, carrying the little girl toward the hearth where a fire still burned low. "Questions later. She'll die if we don't warm her." Sarah Parker was a practical woman. Whatever questions burned in her mind, and there were many, she set them aside to focus on the immediate crisis. She quickly stoked the fire, wrapped the child in warm blankets, and set water to boil for tea sweetened with honey. As she worked, she cast wary glances at the bear cub, which had curled up beside Rusty near the fire, both animals exhausted from their journey through the storm. "Noah, that's a wild bear in our house," she finally said, her voice pitched low so as not to startle the creature. "His name is Theo," Noah replied, as if that explained everything. "He won't hurt anyone. He helped bring the little girl to safety." Before Sarah could respond to this extraordinary statement, the cottage door opened again, admitting a blast of cold air and Noah's father, Marcus. He had been searching for his son in the nearby barns, his face now etched with worry that transformed to confusion as he took in the bizarre scene in his living room. "Noah? What's happening here? Who is this child? And is that—" His hand instinctively moved toward the axe that hung by the door. "Father, no!" Noah stepped between his father and the animals. "Please, listen. I can explain everything." And so, with the storm howling outside and the mysterious child still unconscious by the fire, Noah told his parents the full truth about his collapse in the meadow months ago, about Brenna, the mother bear, and her injured cub, about old Marta's revelation regarding his grandfather's connection to the forest guardians, and finally, about tonight's desperate rescue mission. His parents listened in stunned silence, exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their concern for their son's mental state. It was a story too fantastic to be believed, yet the evidence lay before them. A bear cub that behaved more like a family dog than a wild animal, and a child who had somehow survived exposure that would have killed most adults. "I know it sounds impossible," Noah finished, his voice hoarse from the telling, "but every word is true. And now Brenna is out there somewhere, injured and alone in the storm. We have to help her." Marcus Parker ran a hand through his graying hair, his weathered face troubled. "Even if what you say is true, son, no one could survive in this blizzard. Not man nor beast. We wouldn't make it 10 steps from the door before losing our way." "Your father's right," Sarah added, though her voice was gentler. "If this bear, Brenna, is as intelligent as you claim, perhaps she's found shelter. We can search for her when the storm breaks." Noah wanted to argue, but the logic was undeniable. Instead, he turned his attention back to the little girl, who was finally showing signs of warming. Her previously blue-tinged skin had taken on a healthier pink hue, and her breathing was stronger and more regular. "Who do you think she is?" he asked his mother. "And how did she end up in the forest during a blizzard?" Sarah shook her head, brushing strands of dark hair from the child's face. "I don't know. There's been no word of missing children from our village or the neighboring settlements." She examined the girl's tattered clothing more closely. "These garments are strange. Not like anything worn around here. The fabric is finer, the stitching different. Marcus knelt beside them, his initial shock giving way to concern for the child. Perhaps she's from one of the merchant caravans that sometimes pass through the High Valley. They might have been caught in the storm, and he didn't finish the thought, but the implication was clear. If there had been others with the child, they might still be out there, or worse. The little girl stirred then, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes of a startling violet color. So unusual that all three Parkers gasped simultaneously. She looked around in confusion, her gaze settling first on Theo the bear cub, then on Rusty, before finally turning to the humans surrounding her. Fear flickered across her features and she tried to back away, but Sarah's gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. "It's all right," the woman soothed. "You're safe here. No one will harm you." The child relaxed slightly but remained wary. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, and the words were in no language any of them recognized, flowing and musical, with sounds that seemed impossible for a human throat to produce. "She doesn't understand us," Noah realized. And we can't understand her. Marcus frowned thoughtfully. Old Marta knows many languages from her travels in her youth. Perhaps she could help us communicate with the child. "But we can't reach her cottage in this storm," Sarah pointed out. As if in answer to this dilemma, a sharp knock sounded at the cottage door, barely audible above the howling wind. Marcus approached cautiously, one hand again straying toward the axe. When he opened the door, snow swirled into the room, along with a small, bundled figure that seemed to materialize from the heart of the blizzard itself. Old Marta shook snow from her cloak as Marcus quickly closed the door behind her. Her appearance, just when they needed her most, seemed too convenient to be coincidence. Yet how could anyone have navigated the treacherous conditions to reach their isolated cottage? "I felt a disturbance in the forest's heart," the old healer announced without preamble, her eyes immediately finding the little girl by the fire. "Ah, so it's true. She has come at last." "You know who she is?" Noah asked, astonished. Old Marta didn't answer immediately. She approached the child slowly, kneeling despite her aged joints to meet the girl's unusual eyes. She spoke a few words in the same strange, musical language the child had used, and the girl's face lit up with recognition and relief. A rapid exchange followed, incomprehensible to the watching Parkers but clearly meaningful to the two participants. Finally, old Marta turned to them, her expression grave. "Her name is Elowen," she said, "and she comes from a place far beyond our forest, a place I had thought existed only in legends." "What place?" Marcus demanded, his patience wearing thin with these mysteries. Old Marta sighed, her ancient eyes reflecting the firelight. "The Hidden Valley, a sanctuary where humans and animals have lived in harmony since time immemorial. A place protected by powerful guardians, like Brenna, and hidden from the outside world by magic and mountain." Noah's eyes widened. "Is that where Brenna came from?" "Not our forest at all. Brenna was born in our forest," old Marta corrected. "But her mother, Ursa, whom your grandfather saved, came from the Hidden Valley as a young bear. She was an emissary, sent to find allies in our world." The old healer's face softened with memory. "Your grandfather was one such ally, Noah. As was I in my younger days. But why would they need allies?" Sarah asked, drawing the still silent Elowen closer to her protective embrace. "Because the valley is dying," old Marta said simply. "Its magic wanes, its barriers thin, and there are those in our world who have discovered its existence and seek to exploit its resources and secrets." She looked meaningfully at Theo, the bear cub now watching her intently. The trap that injured Brenna was set by such men, hunters and trappers who have noticed the unusual animals that sometimes venture from the valley into our forest. And Elowen? Noah prompted. How did she end up alone in the blizzard? Old Marta translated this question for the child, listened to her musical response, then turned back to the Parkers. She was fleeing with her family and other valley dwellers when they were attacked by hunters. In the chaos of the blizzard, she became separated from the others. Brenna found her wandering alone and recognized her as a valley child from her scent and the token she wears. For the first time, they noticed a small pendant hanging around Elowen's neck, a polished stone carved with symbols that matched those in Noah's grandfather's journal. Brenna was trying to lead her back to her people, old Marta continued, but her injury made travel difficult, and the storm was worsening. When she realized she couldn't make it, she brought Elowen to the one human she trusted, you, Noah. Noah felt the weight of this trust like a physical burden. And now Brenna is out there somewhere, injured and alone. We have to find her. Yes, old Marta agreed, her voice heavy with urgency. But not just for Brenna's sake. The valley dwellers need our help, all of them. If the hunters find them before they reach the new sanctuary... She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. What new sanctuary? Marcus asked, his initial skepticism giving way to reluctant belief in the face of so much evidence. Old Marta stood slowly, her aged body protesting the movement. There is a place deep in the mountains beyond our forest, a new valley with natural defenses that could be enhanced with what remains of their magic. The valley dwellers have been secretly relocating there for months, but the journey is perilous, especially in winter. She looked at each of the Parkers in turn, her gaze finally settling on Noah. Your grandfather discovered this place years ago. The final pages of his journal, which I've kept hidden until now, contain maps and observations that could guide the valley dwellers to safety. But the journal alone is not enough. They need guides who know our world, who can help them avoid the hunters and navigate the dangers. You want us to help them, Noah realized. It wasn't a question. I want you to fulfill your grandfather's legacy, old Marta corrected, as he always believed you would someday. A tense silence filled the cottage as the Parkers absorbed this extraordinary request. Outside, the storm continued its assault, a reminder of the deadly conditions awaiting anyone foolish enough to venture forth. Yet, somewhere in that same storm was Brenna, probably dying from her wounds, and an entire community of refugees fleeing persecution and seeking sanctuary. Marcus was the first to speak. It's suicide to go out in this weather. We should wait until the storm breaks. By then, it may be too late for Brenna, Noah argued, and the valley dwellers could be captured by the hunters. Sarah, still holding Elowen protectively, looked up at her husband. Marcus, if what old Marta says is true, these people need our help. We can't turn our backs on them. People, Marcus repeated skeptically. Or animals with human intelligence? Or both? I don't even understand what we're dealing with here. Both, old Marta confirmed. The Hidden Valley is home to humans who live in harmony with nature, but also to animals who have evolved differently from those in our world. Animals with greater intelligence and abilities. Some, like Brenna, can even form bonds with humans outside the valley, as she did with Noah. As if to emphasize this point, Theo the bear cub rose from his place by the fire and approached Elowen, nuzzling her hand affectionately. The little girl smiled, the first expression of happiness they had seen from her, and stroked the cub's head with familiar ease. Marcus watched this interaction, his resistance visibly weakening. Even if we wanted to help, how could we possibly find Brenna or these valley dwellers in a blizzard like this? Noah turned to Rusty, who had been watching the entire conversation with unusual attentiveness. Rusty can find Brenna. He tracked her scent through the storm once already tonight. The old dog's ears perked up at the mention of his name, and he stood, his arthritic legs somehow steadier than they had been in years. He moved to the door and scratched at it, looking back at Noah expectantly. "And I know these mountains better than anyone except old Marta," Noah continued. "If anyone can find a path to this new valley, it's me." "Not alone, you won't," Marcus said firmly. He looked at his wife and son, then at the strange child from another world, the bear cub that behaved like a family pet, and the ancient healer who had appeared as if by magic just when they needed her. His world had been turned upside down in a single night, but some truths remained constant. Chief among them, his duty to protect his family and help those in need. "We'll go together," he decided. "As a family. Sarah, prepare provisions for a journey. Noah, gather every warm garment we have. I'll ready the sled and horses." He turned to old Marta. "Can you stay with the child? She seems to trust you, and she'd only slow us down." But old Marta was already shaking her head. "Elowen must go with you. She can lead you to her people once you're close enough. And more importantly, she bears a token that will identify you as friends, not foes, to the valley dwellers." She pointed to the strange pendant around the child's neck. "Without that, you might be mistaken for hunters and driven away, or worse." Marcus wanted to object, but the logic was undeniable. "Very well, but she rides on the sled and stays bundled. I won't have another child's life on my conscience if this goes wrong." As the Parkers prepared for their dangerous journey, old Marta took Noah aside. From within her cloak she produced a familiar leather-bound journal, his grandfather's record of the forest and its secrets. "It's time," she said simply, pressing it into his hands. "Read it on your journey. It contains knowledge you'll need about the valley dwellers, about the new sanctuary, and about your own connection to all of this." Noah accepted the journal reverently. "Will you come with us? Your knowledge would be invaluable." The old healer smiled sadly. "My journey-taking days are behind me, young Noah, but I have one final task before I return to my cottage." She gestured toward the door. "I'm going to find Brenna. But the storm," Noah began to protest, "affects me differently than it does you," old Marta finished for him. "Trust that I know what I'm doing, and that I have ways of navigating this forest that you don't yet understand." Before Noah could question her further, his father called him to help with final preparations. By the time he looked back, old Marta had vanished into the night as mysteriously as she had appeared, leaving only a swirl of snowflakes where she had stood. Within the hour, the Parker family was ready. Their sturdy farm sled had been outfitted with runners for snow travel and loaded with provisions, warm furs, and emergency supplies. Their two strongest horses, fitted with special shoes for better traction, stood nervously in the harness, sensing the danger that awaited beyond the barn doors. Noah sat at the front of the sled with Rusty and Theo beside him. The old dog would guide them to Brenna's last known location, and from there they would search for signs of the valley dwellers. Elowen sat behind him, bundled in so many furs that only her unusual violet eyes were visible. Sarah and Marcus took up the rear, armed with the tools of survival: axe, bow, hunting knife, and the generations of mountain knowledge that had kept their family alive in this harsh environment. As Marcus opened the barn doors, the full fury of the blizzard assaulted them. A wall of white so thick it seemed solid. For a moment, Noah's confidence faltered. How could they possibly find anyone in this? How could they themselves avoid becoming lost and frozen? But then Rusty barked once, confidently, and leaped into the snow. Theo followed, his bear's body better adapted to these conditions than any of them, and from behind him, Noah felt a small hand on his shoulder, Elowin, offering silent encouragement. With a nod to his father, Noah urged the horses forward. The sled lurched and then glided into the heart of the storm, carrying its unlikely crew of rescuers toward a destiny that had been set in motion generations ago, when a man named Jeremiah Parker had saved a bear named Ursa and changed the course of 2 worlds forever. The blizzard's fury seemed to intensify as they left the protected confines of their farm, as if nature itself were testing their resolve. The horses struggled against wind-driven snow that stung like needles and drifts that sometimes reached their chests. Visibility extended barely beyond the lead horse's head, making navigation nearly impossible for human eyes. But Rusty was undeterred. The old dog forged ahead with uncanny certainty, pausing occasionally to sniff the air before continuing on his chosen path. Theo stayed close beside him, the bear cub's natural instincts complementing the dog's tracking abilities. Together, they formed a living compass that guided the sled through the white void. Noah had opened his grandfather's journal, using his body to shield the pages from the snow. The flickering light of the sled's lantern revealed drawings and notations that both fascinated and confused him. Maps overlaid with strange symbols, sketches of animals with annotations about their unique behaviors, and passages written in a code he couldn't decipher, all hinting at a world beyond his understanding. But one page caught his attention immediately, a detailed drawing of what appeared to be a mother bear, standing protectively over a human child while facing down hunters with raised weapons. The image was so similar to his own experience with Brenna that a chill ran down his spine, unrelated to the freezing temperature. Beneath the drawing, his grandfather had written, "The bond between guardian and protected transcends the boundaries our world has established between human and animal. Once formed, such a bond cannot be broken, not by distance, time, or even death itself. It becomes a legacy passed through generations, a sacred trust that shapes destinies on both sides of the veil." "The veil," Noah murmured, the words fogging in the freezing air. From behind him came Elowin's voice, speaking in her musical language, but clearly pronouncing the same words. "The veil." Noah turned in surprise. It was the first time she had spoken since they'd left the farm. "You understand?" Elowin nodded solemnly, her violet eyes luminous in the lantern light. She reached out one small hand to touch the journal page, her finger tracing the outline of the bear in the drawing. "Brenna," she said, then pointed to herself. "Protected." The implication was clear. Brenna was more than just a mother bear who had helped a lost child. She was a guardian, bound by ancient tradition and possibly magic to protect Elowin. And now she was injured, possibly dying, because of that sacred duty. "We'll find her," Noah promised. Not sure if Elowin understood his words, but hoping his determination transcended language. They had been traveling for nearly an hour when Rusty suddenly stopped, his hackles rising. Theo froze beside him, a low growl rumbling in the young bear's throat. Noah signaled his father to halt the sled, and the entire party fell silent, listening. At first, there was only the howl of the wind and the creak of snow beneath the sled runners. But then, carried on a gust that seemed to cut through the blizzard like a knife, came a sound that made Noah's blood run cold, the distant baying of hunting hounds. "Hunters," Marcus whispered, his hand moving to the bow strapped across his back. "In this weather? They must be mad, or desperate. Or they know exactly what they're doing," Sarah countered, her voice tight with apprehension. "If they're tracking the valley dwellers, this storm would hide their activities from the village." Elowin whimpered, clearly recognizing the sound. She clutched her pendant and spoke rapidly in her language, her distress evident even without translation. "She's saying the hunters have been following her people for days," Noah interpreted, surprised at his sudden ability to grasp her meaning. "They have dogs trained to scent valley dwellers and weapons that can pierce protective magic." "How do you know that's what she's saying?" his father asked sharply. "You don't speak her language?" Noah hesitated, then looked down at the journal still open in his hands. The page had somehow turned to a new entry, one featuring sketches of men with hounds and strange, rune-marked weapons. "I think the journal is helping me understand," he said hesitantly. "Grandfather wrote about these hunters." Before Marcus could question this extraordinary claim, Rusty barked once, a sharp, urgent sound that demanded attention. The old dog was pawing at something half buried in the snow. Noah leaped from the sled and knelt beside him, brushing away the white powder to reveal a disturbing sight: dark blood frozen on broken underbrush, and beside it, the metal teeth of a sprung trap with fur and flesh still caught between its jaws. "Brenna was here," Noah said grimly. "Not long ago. She freed herself from the trap, but she's badly injured." He examined the blood trail, which led deeper into the forest. "She's heading east, away from our farm." "But why would she go that way?" Sarah asked. "It only gets wilder and more dangerous toward the high mountains." From the sled, Elwyn called out and pointed eastward with urgent gestures. "She says that's where her people were heading." "To the new sanctuary in the mountains," Noah translated, again drawing understanding from the journal, which had turned to yet another page, showing a mountain pass marked with the same symbols as Elowyn's pendant. Marcus frowned at the blood trail. If that bear entered these mountains injured, in this storm, he didn't need to finish. They all understood the implications. Even a creature as powerful as Brenna couldn't survive such conditions while wounded. But Noah refused to accept that conclusion. "We keep going," he insisted. "Brenna saved my life, and now she's saved Elowyn's. We can't abandon her." His father studied him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "We continue east, but only until we find the bear or clear signs that she's gone. Then we focus on finding these valley dwellers before the hunters do." They resumed their journey, leaving the relative shelter of the forest for the more exposed foothills that marked the beginning of the mountain range. The terrain became treacherous. Hidden crevasses beneath the snow, sudden drop-offs masked by drifts, and ice-slick paths that threatened to send the sled careening into oblivion. The horses strained against the harness, their strength flagging in the face of such challenges. Twice they had to stop to chip ice from the animals' nostrils and eyes. The temperature continued to drop as they gained elevation, until breathing itself became painful, the frigid air burning in their lungs. The blood trail had long since been covered by fresh snow, but Rusty and Theo never wavered in their tracking. Something beyond normal animal senses seemed to guide them, a connection to Brenna that transcended physical signs. As they rounded a particularly steep bend, the path widening into a small plateau, Rusty suddenly gave a joyful bark and bounded forward. There, huddled against a rock face that provided minimal shelter from the wind, lay Brenna. The mother bear was barely conscious, her massive body dusted with snow, and her wounded leg held at an awkward angle. The trap had torn her flesh to the bone, and the blood loss was evident in her labored breathing and the glazed look in her usually alert eyes. Noah rushed to her side, heedless of potential danger. But there was no need for caution. Brenna recognized him immediately, making a soft sound of greeting despite her pain. She tried to rise when she saw Elowyn, her protective instinct still strong even in her weakened state, but fell back with a pitiful moan. "Don't try to move," Noah soothed, placing a gentle hand on her head. "We're here to help you." Sarah joined him, her initial fear of the massive predator overridden by compassion for a suffering creature. She examined the wound with practiced eyes. Years of tending to injured farm animals had given her considerable veterinary knowledge. "It's bad," she told Noah quietly. "The wound is deep and beginning to fester. In this cold, gangrene is a certainty, unless we clean and treat it immediately." Marcus had been scanning their surroundings, his experienced mountaineer's gaze seeking shelter. "There," he pointed to a dark opening in the rock face near where Brenna lay. "That could be a cave. If we can get her inside, out of this wind, she might have a chance." Moving an injured bear weighing several hundred pounds seemed an impossible task, but they had little choice. Using ropes, the sled, and every ounce of strength the horses could muster, they managed to drag Brenna's massive form into the cave opening, which proved to be not just a shallow recess but a tunnel extending deep into the mountain. The interior was noticeably warmer than the howling maelstrom outside, and dry enough to risk a fire. While Marcus gathered what fuel he could find, mostly dead brush that had blown into the cave entrance, Sarah prepared her medical supplies. "I don't have the right herbs for a wound this severe," she admitted, her face drawn with concern. "We need plantain for drawing out infection, yarrow to stop the bleeding, and honey to prevent putrefaction. I brought some basic supplies, but nothing strong enough for this." Elowen, who had been watching intently, suddenly tugged at Noah's sleeve. She pointed to her pendant, then to Brenna, and began speaking rapidly in her musical language. Noah listened, trying to understand through the strange connection he seemed to have developed with both the child and his grandfather's journal. She says Brenna carried medicines in a pouch around her neck, hidden in her fur. Sure enough, when they examined the bear more closely, they found a small leather pouch secured to a cord buried deep in the fur at her throat. Inside were packets of dried herbs, seeds, and a small jar of a golden substance that resembled honey but gave off an unusual, pleasant aroma. "Valley medicine," Noah said with certainty, though he couldn't explain how he knew. "Stronger than anything we have. Elowen knows how to use it." Under the child's direction, they prepared a poultice for Brenna's wound. Elowen sang softly as she worked, a melodic chant that seemed to make the herbs glow faintly in the firelight. When they applied the mixture to Brenna's leg, the bear growled once in pain, but then relaxed, as if the medicine brought immediate relief. "Now we wait," Sarah said, settling back on her heels, "and pray." Outside, the storm raged on, but within their rocky shelter a fragile peace had descended. Theo curled up beside his mother, providing warmth and comfort. Rusty kept watch at the cave entrance, his keen senses alert for any approach, whether friend or foe. The Parkers huddled near the fire, conserving their strength for whatever challenges lay ahead. Noah returned to his grandfather's journal, hoping to find information that might help them locate the valley dwellers once the storm abated. As he turned the pages, a loose sheet fell into his lap. A letter, written in his grandfather's hand, but sealed with wax impressed with the same symbol as Elowen's pendant. Breaking the seal with trembling fingers, Noah read, "To my grandson, whom I will never know but whose destiny I have glimpsed. If you are reading this, then old Marta has deemed you ready for the burden and blessing of our family's legacy. The journey ahead of you is fraught with danger, but also filled with wonder beyond imagination. The Hidden Valley is no myth, no fairy tale to frighten children or entertain them on winter nights. It is real, as are its inhabitants, both human and animal. They live in a harmony our world has forgotten, preserving ancient magic and wisdom that might yet save us all from our destructive path. For generations, the Parker family has served as guardians of the forest boundary, protecting the secret passages between our world and theirs. Your grandmother was a valley dweller who chose to cross over, to live in our world out of love for me. The gift of understanding their language runs in your blood, as does the ability to bond with guardian animals. Ursa was my guardian, as Brenna is now yours. This bond is sacred and eternal, transcending the limitations of our separate species. It will guide you when all other guidance fails. The map enclosed shows the location of the new sanctuary, a place I discovered in my final expedition before illness confined me to bed. It has all the features the valley dwellers need to establish a new home, safe from the encroachment of our world and the hunters who would exploit their gifts. Lead them there, my grandson. Complete what I could not. And know that even though we never met in this life, I am with you in ways more profound than physical presence could ever be. With pride and love, your grandfather, Jeremiah. Tears blurred Noah's vision as he finished reading. He had always felt a connection to the grandfather he'd never met, but now that connection had purpose and direction. He turned the letter over to find the promised map, a detailed drawing of the mountain range they now traversed, with a route marked in red ink leading to a valley hidden between 3 peaks. His concentration was broken by a warning growl from Rusty. The old dog was on his feet at the cave entrance, hackles raised and teeth bared. Outside, barely audible above the storm, came the baying of hounds. Closer now. Much closer. "They've tracked us," Marcus said grimly, reaching for his bow. "Or, more likely, they've tracked Brenna's blood trail." Noah looked at the wounded bear, at Eowyn trembling with fear, at Theo pressing closer to his mother for protection. They couldn't move Brenna again in her condition. They couldn't outrun the hunters in the blizzard. They were trapped. And then, from deeper within the cave tunnel came a sound that froze them all in place, a soft, melodic call that echoed off the stone walls. It was answered immediately by Eowyn, who leapt to her feet with a cry of joy and pointed into the darkness beyond their fire's light. "There's someone back there," Sarah whispered, clutching her husband's arm. Something. Noah raised the lantern, its light extending into the tunnel to reveal a sight that stole his breath away. Standing just beyond the reach of the firelight was a man, or something man-like in form, with features that seemed to shift between human and animal depending on how the light struck them. Behind him stretched a line of similarly ambiguous figures, some clearly more animal than human, others bearing valley children in their arms. "Valley dwellers," Noah breathed in awe. The lead figure approached cautiously, stopping at the edge of the firelight. When he spoke, it was in the same musical language Eowyn used, but Noah understood every word as if it were his native tongue. "I am Eldrin, guardian of the Eastern Path," the figure said. "We sensed the presence of one of our protected and came to investigate." His gaze moved to Eowyn, who was already running toward him with outstretched arms. "Ah, little one, we feared you were lost to us." As Eowyn reached him, Eldrin knelt to embrace her. Up close, his features settled into a more recognizably human form, though his eyes remained amber and cat-like, and his movements held a predatory grace no ordinary man could achieve. He looked up at the Parkers over Eowyn's head. "You have cared for our child and tended to a guardian at great risk to yourselves. The valley owes you a debt." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of his family. "We want no debt. We seek only safe passage for ourselves and Brenna once she's well enough to travel. Hunters approach, and we've nowhere to flee." Eldrin's expression hardened at the mention of hunters. Their kind has pursued us relentlessly since the veil began to weaken. They seek our secrets, our magic, our very essence. He stood, still holding Alawan. But they will not find us here. This cave is more than it appears. As if to confirm his words, the baying of hounds suddenly sounded directly outside the cave entrance. Rusty growled a challenge, placing himself between the opening and his human family. Theo joined him, the young bear's hackles raised in a mirror of the dog's protective stance. But Eldrin seemed unconcerned. With a fluid gesture toward the rock wall beside him, he spoke words that seemed to vibrate in the air. Before the astounded Parker's eyes, the solid stone rippled like water, and then parted to reveal a passage that hadn't existed moments before. "Quickly," Eldrin urged. "Bring the Guardian. The hunters must not find this passage." With renewed urgency, the Parkers worked together to move Brenna onto the sled. Though still weak, the mother bear seemed to understand what was happening and made a valiant effort to help, struggling to her feet with Theo's support before collapsing onto the wooden platform. Once she was secure, Marcus and Noah pulled the heavily laden sled toward the mysterious opening, whilst Sarah gathered their remaining supplies. As they passed through the shimmering portal, the stone wall behind them sealed seamlessly, cutting off the howling wind and muffled sounds of approaching hunters. In their place came a profound silence, broken only by their own labored breathing and the soft padding of many feet. They found themselves in a vast underground cavern illuminated by strange, glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The path beneath them was smooth and well-worn, suggesting frequent use. Around them moved the valley dwellers, dozens of them, a procession of the extraordinary. Some appeared mostly human, but with animal traits, fur, unusual eyes, or elongated limbs. Others were animals with an unmistakable human intelligence in their gaze. Children of both types intermixed freely, their faces alight with curiosity at the newcomers. "The old ways still run strong in your blood, young Parker," Eldrin remarked, noticing Noah's lack of shock at their appearance. "Your grandfather would be proud." They continued deeper into the mountain, the tunnel gradually sloping upward. After what seemed like hours of travel through a labyrinth of passages, they emerged into a sheltered valley nestled between three towering peaks, the very place marked on Jeremiah's map. Despite the blizzard still raging in the world beyond the mountains, this hidden valley was temperate and green. A pristine lake reflected the strange, shimmering barrier that arched overhead, a translucent dome that allowed sunlight to enter but kept the harsh weather at bay. "The new sanctuary," Eldrin announced with reverence, "just as your grandfather described it. We have been slowly relocating our people here, but many still remained in the hidden valley, reluctant to leave the only home they'd known, until the hunters came in greater numbers. The valley dwellers dispersed to prepare shelters and healing spaces. Brenna was carefully moved to a grove of ancient trees where other injured guardians were being tended. Noah refused to leave her side, maintaining a constant vigil as valley healers worked their mysterious arts on her wounded leg. Days passed. The Parker family was welcomed as honored guests, shown wonders they could never have imagined. Marcus's skepticism melted away as he witnessed animals and humans communicating as equals, sharing knowledge and responsibilities in perfect harmony. Sarah found kindred spirits among the valley healers, exchanging medicinal wisdom across the boundaries of their different worlds. And Noah discovered his true inheritance, not just land or possessions, but a sacred trust passed down through generations. Under Eldrin's guidance, he learned to access the gifts in his blood. The ability to understand the valley language, to sense the emotions of guardian animals, and to perceive the delicate threads of magic that bound their worlds together. On the 7th day, as dawn painted the valley in gold and rose, Brenna finally awakened fully. Her wound had healed remarkably, leaving only a silver scar where the trap had torn her flesh. She rose to her full height, majestic and powerful once more, and called for her cub. Theo bounded to her side, no longer the frightened young bear who had witnessed his mother's suffering, but stronger and more confident from his time among the valley dwellers. That afternoon, the entire community gathered by the lake shore for a ceremony. Eldrin stood at the center of a circle formed by humans, animals, and those who were both and neither. Noah and his family were given places of honor beside Brenna and Theo. For generations, the boundary between our worlds has been guarded by those with the sight and the heart to recognize our shared destiny. Eldrin began, his voice carrying across the hushed assembly. Jeremiah Parker was such a guardian, and now his grandson stands before us, having fulfilled the legacy entrusted to him. Eldrin approached Noah, carrying Elohim's pendant, now glowing with an inner light. This token of trust belongs to you now, Noah Parker. With it comes responsibility for the continued safety of the new sanctuary and all who dwell here. Noah accepted the pendant with trembling hands. "I'm just a shepherd boy," he whispered. "How can I protect all this?" "The same way your grandfather did," Eldrin replied, "by keeping our secret, by watching for signs of danger in your world, and by remembering that the boundary between human and animal, between magic and mundane, is thinner than most believe." Brenna approached then, her massive head level with Noah's chest. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Noah felt the guardian bond his grandfather had described, a connection transcending words, an oath written in the blood and magic of two worlds. The mother bear lowered her head in what could only be described as a bow. The assembled valley dwellers followed suit, honoring the new guardian of their sanctuary. As the ceremony concluded, Eldrin addressed the Parker family once more. "You must return to your world before you are missed. Questions would be asked that cannot yet be answered. But know that you may return to us through the passages that Brenna will show you. The new sanctuary is your heritage as much as ours." Marcus stepped forward. "Our village struggled this winter. The crops failed, and the game has been scarce. Many families face hunger before spring arrives." Eldrin nodded in understanding. "The balance between our worlds has been disrupted by the hunter's interference. We will help restore it." He gestured to several valley dwellers who brought forward sacks of seeds unlike any the Parkers had seen. "These will grow even in the harshest conditions. Share them with your village as a gift from unknown travelers you met in the mountains. Nothing more." The time for departure came too soon. The Parker family gathered their belongings, said their goodbyes to new friends, and prepared for the journey home. Elohim clung to Noah, reluctant to let him go, but understanding that his path led back to the human world, for now. As they reached the hidden passage that would lead them back to the cave, Brenna and Theo joined them. Eldrin explained that the mother bear and her cub would guide them safely past the hunters and through the mountains before returning to guard one of the secret boundaries between the worlds. Their journey home was remarkably swift and free of danger. True to Eldrin's word, Brenna led them along hidden paths that avoided the hunters entirely. The blizzard had passed, leaving a landscape transformed by snow, but navigable with the guardian bear's guidance. When they reached the edge of their farm, they paused for final farewells. Noah knelt before Brenna, his hand resting on her massive head. "I'll see you again," he promised, feeling the truth of the words in the pendant that now hung around his neck, warm against his skin. Brenna's dark eyes held his gaze with intelligence and affection. She pressed her muzzle briefly against his chest, directly over his heart, sealing their bond in the tradition of guardians and their human counterparts. Rusty approached then, the old dog positioning himself beside Noah. He looked at Brenna and then at Theo, a silent communication passing between the unlikely friends. To everyone's surprise, Theo bounded forward and nuzzled Rusty affectionately before returning to his mother's side. As the Parker family turned toward home, Noah looked back one final time. Brenna and Theo stood silhouetted against the dawn, guardians at the threshold between worlds. The mother bear raised her head and released a roar that echoed across the valley. Not a sound of aggression, but a promise and a blessing. Years would pass. Noah would grow from a shepherd boy into a man who walked between worlds, fulfilling his grandfather's legacy. The seeds from the valley would transform his village's fortunes, bringing prosperity where there had been hardship. Rusty would live far beyond a normal dog's years, the magic of his bond with the valley extending his life until Noah's own children could know the faithful companion who had started it all. And on quiet nights, when the moon hung full above the forest, villagers would sometimes glimpse an unusual sight at the edge of the trees. A massive bear standing watch, occasionally accompanied by a boy who had grown into a guardian of both worlds. The unlikely bond between them, a testament to the extraordinary connection that can form when a mother bear approaches a dying shepherd of a human boy, and everything changes. In the new sanctuary, Eloan would grow into a leader of her people, the human child who had been saved by a guardian, becoming a guardian herself to future generations. And in the Parker family, the story would be passed down through generations, not just as a tale of wonder, but as a sacred trust, a reminder that the boundaries we create between species, between worlds, are far more permeable than we imagine, and that in the most desperate moments, the most unlikely alliances can blossom into something beautiful and eternal. For in the end, it wasn't just about a bear who saved a boy, or a boy who saved a bear. It was about the recognition, across the seemingly vast divide of species and worlds, that love, loyalty, and courage speak a universal language, one that needs no translation and can bridge the widest chasms we create between ourselves and the wild world that has always been our true home.